Okay, good enough. I will call this meeting to order. James, you will do the roll call?
Yep. All right. Chairman Sylvia,
Aye, here.
Vice Chairman Maville,
Here.
Treasurer Pyle doesn't appear to be here.
Okay, thank you. Now we open up to any public comments that someone would like to make. Any public comments? Okay, hearing none. Let's go on to the next item on the agenda. UF CEPD Resiliency Policy Project.
Actually, Chairman, I apologize. Carrie Schumann had something she wanted to say during public comment. She had called me this morning early to let me know to talk about the South Florida water management comment. Can we let her go ahead and speak real quick before we go on to the UF?
So
interview?
are you changing the order of the agenda? Is that it? Because I see Carrie at number 5.
Number 4.
Yes, I would like to change the order of this agenda. Given that it's a workshop, we don't need a motion or a second.
Okay, fair
Okay.
enough.
Thank you. Carrie, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. And I wasn't sure if it was technically public comment or where I was supposed to step in. The reason I asked to kind of switch the agenda here is I just have to get to a doctor's appointment. But we did have that conversation last week asking about that South Florida Water Management District a plan. And so what I'm going to do is, if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen and give you kind of a high level overview and talk a little bit about the comments that we drafted with a couple recommendations. So let me go ahead and do that.
I'm just out of curiosity, Carrie, this is Tom.
Sure.
How long do you think this will take? Because I know Christine has some back end issues too at 2 p.m.
Let's see. Well, how long do you think it might take for you guys? Because maybe we should swap.
I suggested with the talk would go for 20-25 minutes and we'd have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. But basically 2 o'clock is Christine has a kid.
Okay.
meeting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely understand that. I think I have enough flexibility, so we could go with the original order then.
Okay, if you get antsy, just let us know.
No, that's okay. I think that works.
Okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me stop screen sharing though.
I appreciate that.
Yep, no
Once you see a PowerPoint presentation, you get nervous.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to anchor some things but yes, no problem.
I'll look forward to listening to it.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll be
so I'm gonna,
efficient, Carrie.
Oh, no problem.
do you want me to just get rolling here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Tom.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to yank this over. All right, make it bigger. Getting a little, I'm getting better at this. And then I'm going to make it a full screen. Okay, let's see how it works here. All right, so as most of you know, I'm confident we begun working with the Sandoval Captiva Conservation Foundation and had engaged with the Erosion Prevention District earlier, giving a presentation on some issues related to resiliency and strategic planning. The business model we are working under there, it's not entirely the entire business model, but at least one part of it is a experiential learning program with our students in a program we call the Coastal Policy Lab, which means that there are 6 law students and 6 graduate students. And we took those students and we focused all our efforts on Sanibel and Captiva for last semester. And there were 4 projects. One of those was looking more deeply at the opportunities that present themselves to the Captiva Erosion Protection District, Erosion Prevention District. in the context of their legal authority and in the context of the physical parameters of planning for the inevitable sea level rise that will come up on the island. And one of the persistent questions, so this is just to say, this is a presentation that was put together by 4 students, 4 excellent students, and they aren't available because they have other lives and are in class. 2 of them are in class right now for certain. So one of the things we wanted to do was get some sense of what the board's perspective was on the future of the district. And we did that by having our students interview each of you individually and then compile those in a synthesis, which is, I believe, a part of the packet that you have today. The big take home from that for the purposes of this presentation is that everyone on the board was very interested in doing more than just nourishing the beaches and perhaps some beach management as well on the Gulf side, that there was interest on working island-wide, meaning the Back Bay and the corners of the islands and so forth. So, and that they're interested in doing things that are not just putting sand on beaches as well, and looking more broadly at what it means to restore and enhance the beaches in the face of sea level rise. The law students looked at the legal authority, and an engineering student working under Christine looked at what the implications of sea level rise would be on that Back Bay on over 2 scenarios. And Christine will present that in just a few moments. And then one of the things that came out of this, because of the actions of the Florida legislature while just before we began this project, was significant opportunities for funding. There's a lot of money in Tallahassee right now, as you probably have noticed, and there is a lot of money going into resiliency. And can this district capture some of that? And we answer that question, and it's not as great an answer as we would have liked to have had, but maybe some traction can move forward on that going forward. And so this is all information you already know. I'm going to skip right over it. It's who you are and what you are. This was provided for a broader stakeholder audience when we presented in Sanibel. And I've already mentioned about the interviews and so forth, that there's this strong interest in shoreline protection and restoration on the bay side, and that you already have that authority. And you've had a legal opinion from your counsel who's also suggested that. We're here we can confirm that. And I think we can confirm it a bit more robustly than any of the literature I've seen from your in your documents to date. And that sort of comes from 2 purposes. This is your enabling legislation, which says that you have the authority, have the authority to do beach and shore preservation. When you look at the statute in Florida, that is a term of art, and therefore should be interpreted as such across these 2 statutes. And it suggests that in addition to beach nourishment, you can do things like flood control, shoreline and offshore rehabilitation. So a lot of there's been discussion about doing seagrass restoration, and the regulation, and that's an important term, of work and activities likely to affect the physical condition of the beach or shore. So one question is, are you just an authority that implements, or can you also manage and regulate? And I think we can answer that in the affirmative if you choose to. So under your authority, you have the authority to exercise jurisdiction, control, and supervision over the construction of any erosion prevention project. And I'll just take you back to that rather broad terminology: constructed or to be constructed by any person, firm, corporation, public or private within the district, and importantly, to make and enforce such rules and regulations for the maintenance of operation of any such projects as may be necessary. So we read this to suggest that you have at least some degree of regulatory authority over what happens on the shorelines that relate to erosion prevention, and seawalls is a good example of that. Now, whether you choose to use that to say you have to build a seawall, or you have to build a living shoreline, or if you have to come to us for permission to do that sort of thing, is a different question. But it also means that you have the authority to work with the property owners around the island to do this in concert with them in a non-regulatory fashion as well as a management function. And then I'm going to turn it over here to Christine. She's going to talk through the analysis that we did that could result in some planning that you might think about doing on the Back Bay, and then we'll finish up with how that might take place.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Christine Angelini. I'm a professor in environmental engineering sciences at the University of Florida and also the director of our Center for Coastal Solutions. So the work that I'm going to be sharing was largely done by one of our PhD students in my department, Nick Chan. And there's nothing really sort of unbelievably, advanced about this work, but we really wanted to start to get an idea on Captiva, where are maybe some pressure points that you have where sea level rise encroachment may be particularly important to address over this sort of relatively short horizon. Where are you likely to be seeing sort of in particular, where are you likely to be seeing sort of sunny day flooding in the year of 2040? And then where is the island most likely to be experiencing flooding, another 30 years out by 2070? So what we did is just really like a benchtop analysis using data on the topography and bathymetry of the lands and sort of nearshore waters around Captiva, and then used the sea level rise projections that have been published by NOAA of what sea level rise is likely to look like on the 2040 as the kind of urgent timeline, and the 2070 a little bit more relaxed timeline, and one for which your organization and the broader region is very likely going to be wanting to think comprehensively about a larger scale kind of plan. So you can think about the short-term scenario as where do we need to kind of maybe think about urgent action to shore up some challenging areas. And then by 2070, what might be more comprehensive solutions that could be thought about at a broader level. So you can go forward, Tom. So the very first thing we had Nick do was simply evaluate what is the kind of distribution of shoreline types that is likely to be experiencing flooding in this 2040 and 2070 scenario. And so the very first thing he did was digitize the shoreline and categorize the shoreline types as either sort of, mangrove line shorelines. That's what you see in green. And on the far left of this panel, you see what's on the north end of the island. And because it's such a long, skinny sort of feature, it's cut in two, and the south portion of the island is on the sort of in the middle of this slide. And we've got some summary statistics that's on the far right, showing sort of the relative distribution of kind of mangrove or natural shoreline where there isn't any sort of human intervention. Of course, everything on the oceanic side, on the Gulf side, is sand and beach. And then we have in this kind of purple color is the seawall and riprap. And so just the cumulatively across Captiva Island, what we're finding with this analysis is that most of the shoreline, as you residents would know, is mangrove and natural shoreline as a result of all those kind of, undulations in the sort of on the bay side. About 30% of your shoreline is in this sort of is sandy beach. And then you've got about 10% that's either sort of armored with seawalls or riprap. And this is kind of current modern day conditions on the island. So we're now going to be projecting, what does this 2040 scenario look like?
Christina, forgive me. This is Renee Maville.
Sure.
Really forgive me, but this map is inaccurate. Again, I'm so sorry to point this out. But at the southernmost end, if you look at the purple, which is designated as seawall, and then you have mangrove, there's actually it was done 40 years ago. It was riprap.
Okay.
It was planted in there all the way to that next dot. And that that riprap was then planted with mangrove seeds, and some of those mangroves are now 30 feet tall. And the only reason I'm pointing out is not to say your map is wrong, but really to point out that it's a phenomenal example of a living seawall. Right now, that place is SeaWorld with fish and
Yeah.
habitat, and there's tons of guides there, and it's really a brilliant example of how hopefully a lot of in the future we will look at what we did 30 years ago just by adding the riprap and the mangrove seeds, which created, it was done then for loss, not for inundation purposes, but actually for to stop loss of further deletion of what land was there due to the
Sure.
hydroturbidity of the Blind Pass 35 years
I can
ago.
imagine. Yeah. So just in full, I mean, for everybody to know, did this from aerial photos. We didn't have we certainly weren't going to get on everybody's private property
Yeah.
on the backside. So there's probably other locations where you could find something similar, but thank you. So just take this all with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and
that's kind of a
I mean,
big
that's a
picture
good thing when you
perspective.
can't see it from an aerial photograph, as you pointed out. So that's great. Okay,
Well,
next
the
slide.
rationale for pointing it out is that please look very carefully. I think it's a phenomenal example of what we should be looking at in the future, a living seawall.
Yeah, well, you'll have more opportunity to see that down this.
Yeah, and I
further
think,
on.
to
That's all.
absolutely.
Sorry,
So
Brittany.
I'll carry on just because I know Carrie's got to talk to and just kind of get through this as just a sort of, like I said, this is kind of a first pass that we achieved this semester. So yeah, please go ahead, and thank you, Renee, for the comments. I would love to see some photos of that.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, Tom. Okay, thanks. So let's take a look at kind of what some of the inundation looks like. What I wanted to sort of highlight is when I'm going to be sharing these photos in images in the next couple of slides, when you see kind of blue overlaying on land, what this means is that this would be a location where something that is currently land and sort of not inundated at high, sort of mean high water, which is the highest high tide of the day, the average highest high tide of the day, where that sits. And so a location that would look like this would indicate that, you know, the sort of back porch of the home you see on the top would be inundated every high tide of every day on average. So this is in terms of interpretation. It doesn't mean that it's underwater all the time, but it is experiencing chronic and very regular flooding. So just in terms of interpretation, that's how you should be considering this. And please know that this is, you know, the ground level elevation data and things like that are not necessarily at the level of resolution that we might desire. But again, this is likely sort of projections of sea level rise that are within reason. All right, so go ahead, Tom. All right, so what we're going to share first are sort of some of the data from the 1 foot of sea level rise projections. These are what the island may be experiencing, kind of that sunny day flooding in 2040. And I'm going to share with you a couple of locations where we have indication that it seems reasonably likely that there will be flooding of basically some of the structures on the island. So, and in general, or cumulatively on the island, the estimate is that 12 structures are projected to be affected by this 1 foot of sea level rise, according to our analysis. So please go ahead. So we're going to go and sort of zoom into the shoreline at site number 1, and this may be familiar to all of you. This is the location of the South Seas Resort and the lodging there and the Tween Waters Inn. And of note, this is a location where, you know, we have some riprap shoreline, some natural mangrove shoreline here, and some seawalls as well, and kind of different locations across this this particular shoreline type. And so this looks like a location where, you know, when we think about kind of where there might be most urgent needs for intervention, or thinking about where some either leveling up activities may need to happen, this might be a high priority location and one worth a further investigation. I'm sure that these are properties that are worth a lot with the value that they bring in terms of tourism to the island. Okay, go ahead. So now this is another example. Again, this is under the 2040 scenario, where these are individual properties that are have, you know, an indication that they may be sort of experiencing sunny day flooding as well. And again, this is a sort of a location where, you know, additional data on the ground to ground truth this would be really helpful. But when we think about what the cumulative strategies might be for sort of supporting in preventing this type of sunny day flooding. Here we have an example where part of the shoreline is kind of natural mangrove, and then you have it abutting a seawall portion of the shoreline. So this may be a location where already in the short-term horizon, the island and sort of your organization may be wanting to think about mixed scenarios of boosting the natural vegetation as well as bringing up the existing sort of hard infrastructure that is in these locations to sort of prevent such tidal inundation to sort of personal property. Okay, go ahead, Tom. All right, so let's look ahead to the 2-foot sea level rise scenario. In general, of course, you're going to see, you know, a lot more blue, and this is because this kind of further encroachment of sea level rise. This is now 2 feet of sea level rise affecting the island, and so please go ahead. And so now we have kind of a sort of a more pervasive and sort of challenging scenario to be dealing with, where you know, the projections are not only that you know, the areas immediately close to the shoreline may be underwater, but that you may actually have lower lying areas in these more densely more dense residential areas where there may be chronic levels of flooding on a daily basis. So, you know, in reinforcing the shorelines in these locations, bringing up, in this case, what is an existing shoreline, seawall, may be really advantageous, not just to the immediate properties that are on the water, but also the entire sort of neighborhood that's here that is in lower lying elevations. Please go ahead. And of note, there's some other sort of features that under this larger, you know, this more intensive scenario are maybe even more problematic from a water quality perspective. In particular, the South Seas wastewater treatment plant seems like it's in a location where it is certainly the access road to getting out to it, as well as some of the structures are in sort of a precarious situation relative to what the sort of mean high tide levels are going to be, and certainly would be very vulnerable to more intense storm surge and flooding. Okay, go ahead. So in general, this is a summary of what is the sort of the linear length of shoreline that is going to be affected under the sort of the 2040 in blue and the 2070 sort of inundation scenario. So of those shoreline types, what how many acres are going to be sort of inundated under these two scenarios. And what you can see is that most of your island that's going to have challenges currently has mangrove along those shorelines, with sort of a much smaller sort of targeted sort of length of shoreline that's currently under seawall and riprap. So I think that in bulk, if we think about a broader strategy that you might want to pursue across the island, you're talking about kind of amplifying what's currently mangroves for the majority of the areas that you're talking about, potentially sort of bolstering to improve its, you know, or to reduce the potential for flooding. All right, go ahead, Tom. And so, you know, you may be thinking about, you know, what is the potential, you know, consortium of living shoreline versus kind of more hard engineering solutions that you might want to consider for the island, in particular, this back barrier location. That seems like it's predominantly where you're going to be experiencing these kind of increased flooding scenario. And so I think probably most folks in the room are familiar with what living shorelines are, you know, the use of natural vegetation and things like oyster reefs to stabilize the existing shoreline and leverage the kind of natural ability of these biological habitats to accrete vertically or grow vertically with rising sea levels, and leveraging those kind of natural functions to provide shoreline protection services. And in general, the performance of these living shorelines tend to do really well where you don't have really intense hydrodynamic activity generated either by natural currents or by boat wakes, where you don't have, you know, pounding sort of wave stress on the shorelines. Those are locations where, you know, harder engineering solutions may be more viable. So we just did we mocked up some scenarios of like what the future could look like, given what the existing shoreline types are and what the relative stresses are on the island. And these are just not at all meant to be clear recommendations, just to get the group really continuing to think ahead about what is the management scenario that would want to be pursued, particularly on the back barrier bay side. So Tom, you can go ahead to the next slide. So we just sort of suggested that in this, we have our current scenario of what the shoreline delineation type is. And as Renee mentioned, this may be similar, or this may not be totally accurate to what's on the ground because we were doing this from our computers here in Gainesville. But what we are projecting on sort of in figure 2 is, given the existing shoreline types, the sort of the likely hydrodynamic energy that you have experienced in different locations, like what would be a potential scenario to bolster the kind of the existing shorelines. And Nick is suggesting in his sort of projection is that actually in the northern end of the island, where you have a lot of more sort of hydrodynamic energy, impacting the shoreline types, that this might be an opportunity for potential expansion of those seawalls and simply leveling up through that function, rather than trying to implement mangroves and expecting that they're going to, succeed in such a sort of a more stressful environment. However, go ahead, Tom. If we go to more southern reaches of the island, where we have kind of lower, energy regime, and there is the opportunity for those, the biological habitats that you might leverage in a natural shoreline to actually accrete sediment and laterally and sort of vertically build up. These may be locations where you would really want to sort of encourage and maintain the natural shorelines there, and simply augment it through enhanced living shoreline type of interventions. So go ahead. So anyways, you could have an alternative future where, essentially some of that mangrove shoreline, there could be a benefit of transforming some of that into seawalls and to more hardened shoreline types, or mixed hybrid type of shorelines, where you're leveraging some of the ecosystem service benefits of the natural vegetation, but capitalizing on some of the real storm surge and sort of elevational benefits that you could gain through hard infrastructure. So again, this is just a crack. It was a student project this semester, but it's meant to just kind of get the group thinking, and I know you already are, about how you may be planning for the short and longer term scenario, and thinking holistically about those. So I'll turn it over to Tom now.
Yeah, well, just before we do that, what this sort of argues for is thinking strategically, which was part of the sort of the charge we had about resiliency. And so rather than, go property by property, seawall, living shoreline, and so forth, look at the whole island and come up with an approach that makes sense from an island-wide perspective. And I think this sort of, as Christine mentioned, gives you a sense of that. Just show you a little bit where other communities are going with some of this discussion, where they have sort of dense urban shorelines. Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council is currently involved in an effort to create a model for what the term used is leveling up. So going to and getting the shoreline to an elevation that is greater than it currently is, because otherwise the waters will move landward rather than be absorbed by that greater elevation. So the idea is you level up seawalls, you level up living shorelines to some uniform height that protects the properties behind it. That's easier said than done, I can tell you that. But Broward County has already passed an ordinance which requires its communities to begin this process. When people put in a new seawall or they rehabilitate a seawall, they're calling them here in the Tampa Bay ordinance proposal a tidal flood barrier. So it could be a living shoreline or it could be a seawall. It sets a minimum height at 5 feet. That's based upon the NOAA's medium high projection for 2070. And it creates a planning framework around which to do this, what types of projects and how they will be implemented to get to that 5 feet border. Because every so every property that's less than 5 feet is a potential threat to its neighbors, because of that's the way water moves, as you all know. So this is the sort of the meat of that proposal, that by 2040, all substantially repaired or substantially rehabilitated tidal flood barriers will have to be 5 feet above sea level, essentially. At the 2040 sea level. So that's kind of how they derive that. And I think that's something that you could be thinking about in strategic planning, is how does Captiva Island protect itself and maintain its character as well, its environmental character. Now, funding. So this costs a lot of money. You can certainly expect property owners should have to pay for some piece of this, but the larger planning of it and perhaps doing it in a way that is strategic might benefit from the sorts of revenues that you have through your tax and assessments, and also from funding that would come from the state government. The state passed the statute in 2021, the Resilience Planning Act. And as I mentioned, it has got a lot of money associated with it. And there's a lot of effort right now around the state, communities doing their vulnerability assessments in order to get in line for this money, to begin to do these sorts of infrastructural things that are broader and that are not, house by house by house. Unfortunately, it does not include independent special districts like the Captiva Erosion Prevention District. That was, from what we can tell, an oversight. It had to have been, because it makes so much sense for these districts to have been included. There's all kinds of inland navigation districts and other independent special districts who have resiliency functions and have their own source of matching funds and have their own governance mechanism, just like CEPD. But they're not in there now. And so we wrote a little piece calling for that to be considered. I know there was some discussion of it, to amend it this year. I don't know where it's gotten. The folks at the Beach and Shores Preservation Association in Florida are very interested in this as well. And so it seems to me it's in your interest to advocate for the inclusion of these independent special districts such as yourself to get access to the resiliency money that's coming down the pipeline. And we just showed some examples where there are special purpose resiliency districts around the country and elsewhere in Florida. There's about 187 that the students determined have some resiliency authority in their mandate, and then it's going on around the country as well. Connecticut is probably the most interesting one because it's specifically to create resiliency districts and expanding the scope of existing erosion control districts for that purpose. So that's sort of it. The conclusion is you yourselves told us you wanted to work more broadly than just on the nourishing the beach on the Gulf side. And that we've concluded, along with your attorneys, that you have that legal authority, and that legal authority may be even more robust than you might have thought it was. That we have this, that there is, the opportunity to think strategically because you're a fairly small island and you can work at a level that a lot of communities can't, and you're homogenous in terms of the composition, have a single authority, unlike Tampa Bay, which is 28 cities. And that you may want to consider advocating to get funds directed your way because you have the ability to match those funds in ways that are unique that other local governments have, and why you're not included in this current legislation, we don't know. Okay, I'll stop sharing there, and we'll take a few questions or however you want to handle it from there.
Thank you so much, Tom and Christine. This was very informative to see. And you are correct. We do, we know of the special legislation that's being amended right now. We do have a lobbyist firm that we're working with to help us with that. I'll be in Tallahassee in a couple weeks to see how that's all going to report back. So do we have any questions from our commissioners, our two commissioners who are here, chairman or vice chairman?
I do, but
Go ahead, Renee.
oh, okay. So first, it's just two questions. So the first question is for Angelini. Is that the correct pronunciation? Okay.
Sure, yes, it is.
Well, it's
Great.
Christine.
Yeah, you
Well,
could just call me Christine.
I used to live in Italy, so there's such a beauty to the language where you have to really pronunciate the vowels and say it with passion. So anyway, with that being said, you mentioned about hybrid, and just an FYI, the island, the people I've spoken to are very much into a hybrid concept. The two questions here. So the hybrid concept basically is where to prevent inundation, that there has to be a permanent structure like you mentioned, but in front of that, so that would terminate at the actual grassy area of the person's property. And technically, people here are supposed to have at least 5 feet NGVD of of land before they actually build. It's not an ordinance, but it's sort of a very strong suggestion. So, but a lot don't. So
Mhm.
realistically, if there's a 1 foot flood, like you pointed out. So the question is, I didn't really see any hybrid models that is really strongly thought about here by a lot of homeowners on the Bayside, where you would have a wall that would terminate prior to the existing mangroves where they begin, where the wetlands begin, and then there add the riprap to further build it. So a hybrid is really going to have a lot of traction here. Don't believe me, just I'll bet $1 to a donut. And the second,
Yeah, and I think it's something, yeah, I'll just comment very briefly, which is, I think that there's an opportunity to use those hard engineering solutions side by side with the green ones. I mean, I
Great,
think
okay.
that your island already has that built into what its current composition is. Clearly, it sounds like you have an example where actually the blending of the two has been, not achieved two functions. Number one, it's stabilizing what was otherwise an eroding shoreline, and it's also providing ecosystem service benefits. There's fish habitat there, there's wildlife, I'm sure there's shorebirds and things like that that are using,
Right.
the mangroves. So
Right.
that's a dual function, which I think is something that, is really, good for nature and natural systems, but also good for, performing the critical function that you need, the harder infrastructure to provide. So I agree that that's in some locations there, that's going to be the most attractive option. And fortunately, I think many of your homeowners have the ability to basically boost up their, that some of that hard infrastructure. But I think it would be really in the island's benefit to try to match that with a sort of a strong recommendation to also boost up the natural infrastructure, because working together, they're going to be best performing.
That's a very easy sell in Captiva. A lot of people are very independent. They came here for the nature. It's it's going to be it's going to be a very easy sell. The second question is, regardless of preventing the inundation, what is the science regarding the inundation below the ground? Because right now we have septic systems and all that. We are pursuing the possibility of sewage treatment, but will the salt water inundate underneath, so that should we see 2 feet sea level rise, even if we do have, water finds its own level. So will the water creep under the, let's say there's a cement barrier, goes
Yeah,
beyond?
I mean, you're going to have groundwater pressure. If the mean water level, I mean, it's going to shift the groundwater level.
up.
So
Bottom line, it's going up.
absolutely, it's not like you're going to, I mean, it just physically makes sense, right? Even if
Yeah.
you have a small barrier that prevents the sort of the overland flooding, it
Wow.
doesn't mean that when you have mean water levels changing and rising, that is going to absolutely percolate through the soil structure and start interacting with septic tanks. So I haven't been involved in all the discussions that have happened around septic, but you're in a prime location where conversion is a very good idea for
Right.
as a result of the intensifying interaction that is going to be likely happening between septic and the septic tanks and sort of the water levels that are going to be rising with sea level rise.
Well, we need to use your last 1 minute of video to utilize as a tutorial for those naysayers who don't think that we don't need a sewer system. So thank you. That was perfect. And
Thank
I
you,
would-
Christine and Thomas. And I think we'll move on with Carrie now.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there. So I appreciated hearing from Christine and Tom, and if Tom's still on the call, he may have a little insight to add here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, and thank you guys. And any questions you want to follow up with us, we're happy to participate as well. We'll be continuing to work with the Central Captiva Conservation Foundation in a variety of ways in the coming years. So you're right there.
All right. So I was asked today just to give you a brief sort of comments on the South Florida Water Management District Sea Level Rise and Flood Resiliency Plan. Again, I had sort of indicated that our organization already was planning on reviewing and coming up with some comments. So what I thought might be useful for us today is I thought it would be useful to give you a high-level summary of that plan's focus and strategy, to basically outline the key points that right now we have in our comment letter, and to provide a couple recommendations around this. So I'm going to go ahead here. So really what this plan is for them right now, and this doesn't mean that this is necessarily this is a very targeted first step for the district, and there may be other things coming down in the pipeline for them that we're just not aware of in their future efforts, but this is kind of their starting point. So they've got this plan. First of all, it focuses on something called the Central and Southern Florida Project. And I'm just going to look here to kind of check my phrasing. So really what we're talking about here is we're talking about what they call a regional water management system, a primary system of canals, natural waterways as well that connect to community drainage districts, hundreds of smaller neighborhood systems to effectively manage floodwater caused by heavy rainfall events. And that this also represents a coordinated effort among primary, secondary, and tertiary system water managers. So again, they're really focused on this particular system. It was something that was developed with the Army Corps about 70 years ago. They've been maintaining the waterways and the structure over the course of that time, but they're sort of recognizing that the structure is starting to age, that it's going to need attention in relation to sea level rise and upcoming impacts. Now, it is important to note that, of course, there are other connected waterway systems that would be considered more secondary and tertiary that are not part of this project. And in that case, the way that the district manages this is that they describe, you can even find this language on their website, that this is sort of a joint effort. Their management, in addition to managers that occur at different scales. So whether that's a county level water control districts or at the city level, so that everybody's sort of working together on this aspect of flood control. And this plan also focuses specifically, the way that they talk about flood control is that they have a program that was started in 2015 that essentially set metrics for what they call flood protection level of service. And so that's how they define whether or not they're actually providing, a certain level of flood protection for communities within the district. And also specifically within this plan, it also sort of narrows in scope right now to water control structures. And so what the plan focuses on would be the list of projects that are include structures like weirs, like floodgates, like spillways. And what they're assessing is they're sort of asking a broader question. So I think they're looking at it from two angles. Can we control the additional flooding that we might expect from sea level rise and climate change impacts? And so that would also include inland flooding. So those heavier rain events, but also can our structure withstand that sea level rise and that heavy rainfall? And so the kinds of strategies that they're looking at within this plan include, and this kind of mirrors a lot of what Tom and Christine were just talking about, a mixture of these strategies that include hardening, nature-based solutions, automation, and what they mean by
I'm gonna turn my mute off.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
And what they also mean by automating in this capacity is saying, okay, instead of somebody having to go out and actually manually change the floodgates or reset floodgates, that they sort of set things up so that it can be done at a distance remotely. Okay. The other thing to note about the actual sort of strategy of how they're thinking about this is they're using a basin-wide approach. And just to show you what that looks like. And so here, here's how they're outlining basins. So these are all the flood drainage basins associated specifically, again, with that Central and Southern Florida project. And what they've done is they have categorized them into low, medium, and high prioritization. And so here you can see, and the other thing that you can see here is you can kind of see what's already in progress for them. So you can see that they've been working on portions of Miami-Dade and kind of into Broward County, Big Cypress Basin. You can also see that there's a couple more basins in red that are likely to kind of be shuttled into their process soon. The other thing to know is the way that they have categorized these basins is according to what. So one thing I should mention is that I also kind of pulling into the comments, I did pull in our hydrological modeler here, Paul Julian, to kind of form our comments and to talk through, what's going on with this plan. So I think both he and I feel like it's a pretty reasonable objective set of criteria that they're using to rank these basins, but these criteria are falling under two sort of larger categories. So the first is how likely the water control structures and those waterways in a particular basin, how likely failure is, and also the consequence of that failure. So consequence of failure takes into account, so one of their kind of in the vision for the resiliency plan, they also think about kind of in their prioritization and process, they're thinking about, where's the most critical infrastructure, where do the most people live, and using that as part of their criteria for ranking these basins. Okay, and they're using a three-phase approach to respond to deficiencies. Really, the first part is they're assessing deficiencies. So they're going basin, they're looking at a whole basin. They're trying to note, where are deficiencies either currently or into the future under sea level rise and climate change impacts. Then that would trigger them to go into a planning and design phase. And then followed by an implementation phase. And so right now they're suggesting that this process will occur over about an 8 to 10 year time frame for all the basins that they've currently designated. They're also suggesting that their process will be to essentially shuttle 2 basins per year into the assessment process. So like we noted on the last map, right now they are focusing on the that basin across Miami and Broward County, and then they're looking at that Big Cypress Basin. And what they do once they've sort of assessed issues and deficiencies within that basin, then they go into this phase where they look at what are the potential solutions, and then they have a further ranking process to help them decide out of those potential projects or solutions which are going to get them the most benefit. And what this does result and how this kind of fits into that funding that Tom started to talk about was that the way these resiliency funds work is that, they've sort of cordoned off funds for different kinds of pieces, whether it's planning pieces, implementation, but they're also asking the water management districts across the state to submit projects. And so every year, the South Florida Water Management District will be submitting a project list for what they'd like to see get done, under these resiliency funds. And so here's, again, with this talk with our hydrological modeler, these are some of the kind of key points we picked out and we currently have in our letter. First of all, and it sounds like from Paul's perspective, this is also an argument that's been made at other points about how the district thinks about flood management, and also something we think about within resiliency is that there are additional areas and communities that are of flooding concern that certainly fall outside of those basins that are right now delineated around the Central and Southern Florida project, but that still fall within those district boundaries for the water management district. That certainly includes Sanibel and Captiva. So if we thought about Sanibel and Captiva sort of falling within a larger delineated basin, it would probably include mostly secondary and tertiary waterways and would still have infrastructure that is important and associated with that and flood control. But again, remember that right now within the plan, they're focusing on this sort of more primary system, but they do work in conjunction with these secondary and tertiary water managers. And they also, even within the plan, and I'm just going to kind of refer to this, they do describe within the basins that are already delineated, they do talk about that the district engages partners and stakeholders with responsibility for the secondary and tertiary flood control systems to identify the best course of action to mitigate any identified deficiencies. And so I think, our argument is that we should also be considering these additional areas that aren't currently delineated, both within the current resiliency focus and, even beyond flood control, there's going to be additional resiliency considerations in terms of water quality and water supply, where we think that they should be delineating some of these additional areas, including the portions of the state that include Sanibel and Captiva. The other thing, so again, they have a pretty rigorous and a pretty objective process for ranking which basins are going to focus on. However, the one thing that they don't include in this particular project is, what we're able to see is that these basins are ranked high priority, medium priority, low priority. But what we don't know is we don't know the specific rankings that were given to each basin that would help us understand that timeline for incorporation into their process. And so we have other basins, even if Sanibel and Captiva aren't included in a basin, we have other basins that will influence us that, given their criteria, still may be low priority. So if we think about the Caloosahatchee, if we think about Lake Okeechobee, where it would be helpful for us to just understand, again, on a finer scale, where they fall into their ranking and where they fall into their timeline. So we're suggesting that they include more specific ranking for those basins. The other thing that we asked in our letter was we asked them to regularly revisit their ranking and prioritization process. And so I suggested annually, but partially so that if there is new information that comes into light during their process, whether that's through their modeling and understanding about sea level rise impacts and future impacts, or if there's something that changes in terms of current flood issues. So the idea is that if they were to incorporate new information regularly and revisit those rankings, that would provide a more flexible and equitable process. The other thing is that there's a couple more final pieces here. Again, the criteria are fairly objective, but one thing under consequence of failure that may need to be revisited and may matter for communities like Sanibel and Captiva. So as they think about prioritizing their projects, they are looking at projects that benefit and protect sort of the most critical assets, or what they call lifelines, per area, right? That density idea. But I think it may be important for them to also think about the fact that there may be communities that are in areas where their lifelines or their critical assets, if you're talking about core services like hospitals or, just core supportive infrastructure, where maybe their density is not the issue, but that there's less of those particular lifelines or critical assets in an area, but they might be associated with communities that have few alternatives. And so we noted that they may need to think about this a little differently in terms of being equitable to those communities. The last thing, just to know that they're incorporating, again, they've got these suite of things that they're thinking about. Again, they've got some really good things on the docket for thinking about green infrastructure. And we even noticed in our earlier conversation right now that we're talking about a balanced way of protection, and we're thinking about these inclusions of nature-based solutions. So they have a couple, and I can tell you about these if you have questions, but they have a couple good things on the docket. They have a thin layer project, which is looking at ways of supplementing mangroves to see if they can help them essentially increase their capacity to keep up with sea level rise and provide resiliency while being resilient themselves, and an additional project that looks at assessing green infrastructure in the Little River watershed. And we just ask in that letter to continue clarifying and outlining just through their process as they continue how they're going to use outcomes from these kinds of projects, and how they are and will use nature-based solutions in addressing these resiliency issues. So again, that's what we commented on, sort of the 5 key points we really commented on in the letter that we put together. And so the question for you and sort of the recommendations here are, first, we can certainly submit it just as SCCF, but there is certainly an opportunity to submit this in a joint capacity. And so that might be something that you want to think about. And so what I would suggest is, so in this case, this is a letter that these comments are due tomorrow. But what I could do is, after I log off and head to my appointment, is I could send out the letter for review. I could include a link to the plan that I just gave you a high-level overview. And I could also send you these slides to review. And I can be in contact with Jennifer tomorrow, and you can let me know if you have interest in being a co-signatory on this letter. The other thing that we may want to do is, given that the Water Management District is sort of at the start of this process, they have a pretty specific focus right now, but is clearly they're going to continue engaging in their planning process as we continue to engage in ours. We represent an area where we have, likely more of those secondary water managers that would be interfacing with the district. And they've talked about that process, but we don't know exactly what that would look like. That we may have an opportunity to engage further with the district and the resiliency staff to get a little bit more understanding about this process and where their future directions are. So what we could do is, and I'm happy to facilitate this, is, we could reach out to them and try and set up a conversation that would include Sanibel and Captiva and, likely other, potentially other interested communities that would be considered in example, if we ask them to delineate a tidal basin. So that's just the sort of the high level overview of what's going on with that plan and what we put together for comments. And I guess I just want to open up to questions and see what comments you might have.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask a really quick question for the benefit of our commissioners. When you
Sure.
say joint capacity, who else would be joining in the comments with the joint capacity? Would Sanibel as well?
Probably not with our time frame right now, but that doesn't
Okay.
preclude, again, if we want to engage with them further, kind of find out a little bit more about their process, how that fits in with our planning, I think that would be a point where we absolutely pull in Sanibel. And then as we engage further, we can certainly have them on, any kind of joint communications.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Chairman, do you have questions, or Vice Chair?
I raised my hand. I'm trying to do it according to protocol.
Sure.
Good.
Carrie,
Yeah.
what's his name? Chauncey. He's on the seat. He's on that board. Have you had any discussions with him? What's his take on all this?
I have not with him. So
Well,
I could
yeah,
certainly reach out, but I don't know what his take is on this.
Right. Okay. And you are aware that
Mhm.
there's been a legacy where the Southwest Florida what, I don't know how what is it called? The Southwest Florida Management District?
South Florida. So here's a thing that's tricky for us too, is because in the majority of things that we're involved with, we're Southwest Florida, but in this, we're South Florida. So we're part of the South Florida Water Management District in this
Right.
case.
So there's
Yeah.
always been sort of a bias
Mhm.
towards big ag versus the barrier islands.
Sure.
And with the new governor,
Mhm.
there was a major replacement of board members.
Mhm.
However, the jury's out as to whether there's been any massive change as far as philosophy and mindset.
Yeah.
So, and now we're seeing that I guess a lot of the priorities are going to go to them. So I just want to know if you were aware of the legacy and history. But the big question is, but excuse me, Chairman, didn't you have a conversation with Chauncey? And if so, can you share with us any discussions that might have taken place since he's our representative on the board?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the conversation was the importance of where we are in the scheme of things, and that we were going to move forward with dealing with sea level rise. And I would second your comment. To me, a lot of this strikes me as gerrymandering all over again.
Right.
Because basically, when you stick Southwest Florida into South Florida, it's overwhelmingly going to be let's fix Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach, because that's where the money is. That's where the big tourist dollars are. And Southwest Florida will get forgotten. And I don't know, Carrie, as I'm reading through your
Mhm.
commentary, and I don't have the letter, I don't have the presentation.
Sure. Yeah.
But, reading between the lines, it strikes me like, wow, we have to go through some process to get something done. And we're not even in this district, and we're not even in this line of consideration. It just strikes me like, we're the stepsister in this whole process.
Chairman, I bumped into Chauncey and I asked him what he was doing about it. And he just explained, oh, they just focused on the, what Carrie explained about the dikes and the reservoirs and all that. It was kind of a non-answer.
Yeah, I mean,
Said goodbye. Chauncey's a politician, so I was just curious if he committed to anything other than.
But Renee, you and I have talked about at our meetings about the importance that we want to go forward with this.
Right.
And I know it's not a violation of sunshine for me to comment on the fact that I thought your question to the earlier presenter with respect to water levels that may impact what we're dealing with in terms of septics and sewers was also very important. So we have a couple of challenges, and I don't want to be panic here. The sky is not falling. But if we're going to deal with some of these issues, we're going to need someone's support at the state level to get some funding to do whatever it is we need to do. So as we go through and we put together a plan and get the stakeholders involved, we have some real challenges here that are not going to wait 10, 20, 30 years to solve. So I'm a little bit feeling like, wow, we've got some real problems here. I think you and I have discussed that we wanted to move forward with dealing with sea level rise, and perhaps, again, at some point in time dealing with the septic system, but it seems as if there's a huge bureaucracy out there that's really going to stifle our ability to move forward.
But Chairman, I wonder if it's going to stifle. So Carrie, here's the magic question.
Mhm.
With this letter, we're basically saying this is our point of view. To use the direct vernacular, are we just stroking the bureaucracy? And if so, fine. But at least you're keeping the door open, the messages going, and letting us know where their state of mind is. So, I mean, good for that. You just see what our challenges have been. I've been here 35 years and the challenges remain the same. And I'm not complaining because there's always a solution, and Captivans always get what they want because we're good at what we want to do. And we know, I mean, it just is what it is. So this is going to be, it's not going to be a walk in the park. Thank you for, looking into this particular aspect. And, thank you, Chairman Sylvia, for pointing out that it's, we obviously want to deal with this, but it's not going to happen unless we roll up our sleeves and remove the political speak from the reality, or just try to get some action points going and
Yep.
and hit with the decision makers to say, here's your problem, here's the solution. Can you please get us on board for this? And if I may ask our director, Jennifer, is there any further momentum on our legislation, are there any bills written up? Are we being attached to something? Can you give us any couple of sentences? I know they did send us a report, but do you have any more color other than the report that was generated by our lobbyists?
Not that you haven't already seen or heard about. I mean, the biggest thing that they're focused on right now is the bill, the glitch bill, to try to get the language rewritten so that special districts can apply for that coastal resiliency funding. Now, I just came from a luncheon, excuse me, where Chauncey was there speaking on water quality with Noah Ballenstein, the former FDEP director, who now works for FGCU. And unfortunately, they didn't get into the real meat of their discussion until I had to leave for this meeting. But I did ask Chauncey if he wanted to get together. So Carrie, I was going to say, I mean, if my commissioners are giving, which it sounds like they are, giving direction to staff to give direction to you to go ahead and write some joint comments on our behalf and your behalf. Once that's sent, I would be happy to set up a meeting with Chauncey to talk through it. Because I did tell him that you were going to be giving this presentation today at the 1 o'clock meeting. And, he said, absolutely, whatever I can do to answer questions or help. So
Yeah, please, Carrie, proceed. You get direction, proceed. Let's get going.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And that way we can get clarity around a lot of these aspects. So, yeah.
Yes. And Renee, to finish my response to you, I'm leaving for Tallahassee the week after Dan and I get back from St. Augustine, and I am meeting with Nick and Ellen and Representative Botana regarding any bills, coastal resiliency, that apply now and in the future to CEPD. So once I do that, I'll give a full report, obviously, to the board.
Can you promise me that you can elicit the magic word from these people, even ask the lobbyists? There is a galaxy of separation between I support it, but the magic word is, will they commit? The magic keyword is to get the commit word, that they say, yes, I will commit to this.
Okay.
So when you see them, when you see Botana, when you work your magic, when you're up there, let me know how many people say the magic word.
Okay.
And good luck, of course.
Okay, so Jennifer, I will also send the letter and the associated materials to you after logging off, and then we'll be
Perfect. And you're welcome to carbon copy the board as well, because they probably want to see it. And then once we have it,
okay, because I was going to have you distribute, but if that's
I can do that. I mean, I no problem. I just wanted to tell you you're okay to do it too, but I'm happy to do it. Whatever.
Oh, no, I could do that too. I just was checking in with your process.
No worries. And then once we get that, I can reach out to you and try to set up a time to meet with Chauncey.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
So we're sending the letter, right? You're including the CEPD on that, or are you just?
If you agree to it, I'm just going to send it for review just to make sure.
Oh, okay. Chairman, I'm okay with it. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're going to read it and it's just, CEPD is cool with this too. But
Renee and I will make the usual significant corrections to your
You
letter.
will, but you will not respond all. You will just reply to one person.
I'm not even going to look at it. I'm going to trust that Carrie knows how to write a letter that CEPD is on board. I'm busy.
Okay,
well, I will be around, and again, I'm going to my appointment, but I will be available to check in with and with whatever. So
okay. And picking up on Jennifer's comment, we can email Carrie directly.
Yes. Do not reply all.
Nope.
Other commissioners are on the email. Send it just to either Carrie or to me or to Carrie and I, just not another commissioner.
And that's what I will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, thanks.
All
Right,
right.
Jennifer, on the agenda, I see salary and graded job description analysis. Who will speak on that?
So I wanted to take a chance really quick, Chair, to introduce Dr. Angela Pruitt. She's an HR professional, most recently still with the School District of Lee County. And she was a chief administrative HR officer there at the school district. And I just want to give a little background. So when Bob Gray did his analysis, he and I had a conversation. We had many conversations during that week when he was interviewing staff. And one of the things that he suggested to me was, you know, had we had these job descriptions graded or analyzed for, you know, market value. And I said, no, we hadn't. And he said, do you know of someone that could do that? Because I don't. And I said, I actually do. So I reached out to Dr. Pruitt, who agreed to take a look at Dan and my job descriptions and do an analysis regarding. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pruitt and let her present her findings. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you via Zoom. As Jennifer said, I have been the Chief Human Resources Officer for the School District of Lee County for the last 7.5 years. I am in the process of retiring and I'm transitioning into doing consulting work. And Jennifer was aware that that was the direction I was headed. So she asked me if I would take the opportunity to review the job descriptions and do a salary analysis. And just as a matter of background, I mean, this was one of my primary responsibilities at the school district. We used a company called ERI, the Economic Research Institute. We did a lot of vetting when we selected this at the school district to use as our tool to help us review salaries and create analysis because of the breadth and depth of the work that this company does. And they update literally on a month-to-month basis, they update their data so that you kind of get real time and you put the parameters and they will come back with the range of the salaries that I presented in my summary. I did keep the comparisons relative to the state of Florida rather than the whole entire United States. And simply because of the fact that for the roles that you have, it's a unique situation, nonprofit that you're in. And so I kept it to the state of Florida when I was doing my reviews. And, if you were ever going to go out and do another search, then that is probably where your candidates would come from. So that was the—
Angela, if I may interrupt for one
Sure.
second, I think that was very smart. Again, you may not know my background, but I was the chief economist at Wells Fargo. And we knew very, very well that when you have an enterprise as national as Wells Fargo, wage and salary differences by region are significant. So thank you for just doing Florida.
Yeah, and I also did, just so you know, compare it just to Southwest Florida, and there was not a statistically significant difference. Jennifer was lucky because I just happened to do this work for a very well-known nonprofit in Lee County, and so it was kind of fresh in my mind because I had done this review for another, like I said, another nonprofit in the area that I'm sure you're all familiar with. So. And I looked at the job descriptions, talked with Jennifer. I didn't do as much of a comparison across on the job descriptions. I did the more of the approach of talking through and saying, what is the job actually and what are you doing? And that was one of my recommendations for changing that one job title because the work that's being done really fits more into an operations than what I traditionally consider a technical director and the type of work that is actually being done. So I did go ahead and—
So Angela, you're the one who came up with the change in the title for Dan?
I did. After I talked it through with Jennifer first, I just said, based on what you're telling me and what I'm seeing in here, this aligns more with that operations type hat rather than a technical director hat.
Okay,
when you're— Yeah, and that's really based on, just industry standards and those key work processes and and also what you're requiring of that individual relative to experience and education. And so, that is why I made that recommendation. Now, this is just simply a market rate analysis. This does not, just full disclosure, doesn't get into performance reviews, any recommendations on, how that might look like, anything additional, right? No, if I, because I'm not even aware if you guys have ever done anything, like bonuses at the end of the year or anything like that, or how you do your performance reviews and make recommendations. This is solely the job that's being done today, and what does my analysis say the market bears, and what the titles would reflect. So at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions or, field any comments that you might have.
Renee, go ahead.
I can't hear you. You're muted.
You're muted, Renee.
I'm mute, sorry, it
Yeah,
was muted.
that's all right.
Sorry about that. Anyway, I said hi, it's nice to see you again. I see how you came up with metrics, and
Mhm.
I'm sure the company is fantastic, but what I'm not seeing here, and it's a question,
Sure.
not a criticism, is comparables. Like there are other people that manage direct beach renourishment and apportionment and all the things that Jennifer is tasked with.
Right.
And I was just curious why you didn't say like, well, let's see, in this place, a similar job pays X, like from a retail perspective. I have a department store, and we looked at what the manager gets paid at a Chico's. We looked at what a manager gets paid at Macy's, et cetera. So we know
Right.
what the industry norm is. And I
Right.
didn't see anything there.
Well, that's because it's all embedded within ERI. They do all that work. All I do is put in the parameters.
Gotcha.
All I do, and then I look at it a couple different ways. I look at it, I compare it to, the job functions that the person is doing, and what if it was not a nonprofit? What would that look like? I do all of that, and then that is
Okay.
kind of synthesized down to my recommendation
I gotcha.
based on
Okay,
that.
what is the
Yeah.
percentiles? Like you have, this is Florida based, so where is Lee
Yes.
County? Is Lee County the 90th, the 20th, or the medium, or where is Lee County?
It depends on the nonprofit. It's not by area, it's more by organization. And so what ERI does is takes all of that, and that's why you have your percentiles, because there's some nonprofits in Lee County that are they're paying up at the 75th to 80th percentile, and there's some that are paying down at the the 30th percentile. So it really just it's not by region, it's by industry within the nonprofit realm.
Right. Okay. No, I just wanted to understand how you came up with the metrics. That's all.
No, absolutely. Very valid question.
Yeah.
So Angela, let me ask you, again, building upon what Renee had to say,
Sure.
with respect to nonprofits, what is the consideration in terms of the budget size of the nonprofit?
So as you'll see here, and that's one of the parameters that we put within the analysis. You'll see that I based that on a $500 to $1 million. I did not include your capital budget because that really would have inflated it. It would have really increased, those dollars. And so I just based it on, what Jennifer shared in terms of that particular budget. So that's why you'll see there on my charts.
So to clarify, Angela, you're telling me that as I look at the executive director, if the fiscal year budget is 500K to $1 million, the median is $121,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I have a different question,
Mhm.
and it just came to me. So when you have a basketball team,
Yep.
you would utilize the science, there'd be the median, the 20th percentile, and the 90th percentile. But as you know, in any sports team, the more points you get, the more money you make.
Right.
So where is so we would use this and then look at a performance factor.
Right.
And say, okay, this is what happened in 2021. These are
Yep.
the scores. And so that's, and like you said, in all fairness to, like you said,
Mhm.
performance is not integrated into these
No.
numbers. Yeah.
And there's a whole nother side of ERI, and I didn't include it in this report, that talks about what is standard if you are going to do a performance bonus. If you are like, what is that range that is typically given in a 12-month period for these positions? But I didn't go to that extent with this because what we were, I understood from Jennifer, what we were trying to accomplish is, here's the job descriptions. Do they represent what we're doing? And then what is the value of that in today's market, in a nonprofit industry? So that's kind of but yeah, there's a whole nother side of that,
Right.
that you
No,
can
no, right,
tap
right.
into.
Right.
But again, Angela, as I read this statement, the compensation type is base salary. So this is
Correct.
base salary, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
There's no bonuses thing.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, when Jennifer was hired, Mike Mullins, who championed Jennifer, who's no longer with us, he gave Jennifer.
Is that
the
cause and
right
effect there?
instructions.
Is that a cause and effect?
No, yeah, right. No, but he said, Jennifer, okay, you're on, but you've got to bring in money. You got to earn, you got to bring in money. And, this is, so anyway, so that was a precursor. Chairman Sylvia, I did a little research on my own, and it's kind of good news in a way, but I found out that the person who did a very similar job for Pamela, is Fort Lauderdale a county? Oh, no, it's just a city. It's not a county.
Mhm.
The
Right.
greater Fort Lauderdale has miles and miles of beaches. And for 2.5 years, the person who ran and did actually the same amount of sand with the capital projects, and they were paid a salary with the understanding of a minimum of 40 hours per week. And they had a staff, and I'll get into that. But in 2020, they were paid $111,000.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, there were, they had a lot of, actually, even more, not more, but let's just say their number one job was to interface with the engineers and the project. The other one, so that one is not more important than the other, was interacting and communicating properly with all the stakeholders and everything that Jennifer has to do.
Mhm.
So I just wanted the board to understand that I did, poke around and see what other people are getting in a similar situation. And interestingly enough, it's identical, very close to what Jennifer's getting now, which I thought was very encouraging, that we went ahead and picked a good number, because Fort Lauderdale, they know what they're doing, and they're a very prestigious government in many ways. And
Mhm.
so it's a comparable. It's like,
Right.
hey, how much does an electrician get? Well, if Manhattan charges 120 an hour and we're in New Haven, Connecticut, well, yeah, we should pay 120 or 110 or 125. But the point is that the number, I just wanted to let everyone know that was the
Mhm.
number.
Okay.
And Jennifer, did you know who that person is? Who was the
No.
director?
No.
Nicole Sharp. I called
Right,
in,
and-
but you knew
Right.
what
And how many years ago was she in Fort Lauderdale? 3?
last year and a half ago. We finished
I
in
think it's more than
2020.
Yeah,
that, but
so let me ask Angela then.
Sure.
2 questions.
Mhm.
And I'd like to go back to Renee's point, which I thought was interesting. Bring in money. Where in this executive director listing are we talking about bringing in money?
So, that's really more a question for, I would think, Jennifer, than it would be for me. Because again, my analysis was based on the job description and, my conversations with her. So I would want to defer to her about that and expectations.
Okay. And then
Yes,
second of
so-
all, if I took a salary of in 2020 of 111,000 and I adjusted it for the wage increases over the last 2 years, would you be able to calculate a new number for me?
Not on the fly, but yeah, I definitely could. Not right here while we're sitting here. What I will comment is that 111, I mean, it falls, if you look at the scale, it falls there. It's right, you know, in today's numbers, it puts you at the 45th percentile, right? So that number is, and especially being from 2020, so it probably was even closer to the median or nearer to the median, let's
At
say,
that time.
than, right.
So we
Chairman
need to figure out. Go ahead.
Chairman Sylvia, forgive me, but
Go ahead,
Angela
Renee.
is one of the, Angela is actually, she ran the largest HR division of the largest employer in, you know, in Lee County, which is a super county. And she knows, you know, she's not just anybody. I just.
Thank
wanted
you,
to-
Renee. I appreciate that.
And just
Bob,
to
do you have a
answer-
question?
Wait, can I ask, just comment real quick on the bringing in the money? So when former Commissioner Mullins interviewed me, we talked about that. And that's in terms of grants, in addition to extra money that we did in fact receive, that we've received in the past from our Board of County Commissioners. And so we talked about that because as a government entity, that's how we can get some additional funding is through grants. So for the TDC, this coastal resiliency money that we're not able to apply for yet, any of the federal grants that come our way, which I've applied for, that's what, when we interviewed, that's what we talked about when we talked about bringing in additional revenue.
Great, thank you very much.
And that's another discussion. There's no question that Jennifer's not trying to bring home the bacon. I mean, let's call it as it is. There's no question. It just takes time, and she's put a lot of, I think a lot, but again, this is a separate discussion about performance. The bottom line is, Chairman Sylvia, you asked the right question to Angela. Was it factored in? And Angela did say, you know, we're not, this is merely statistical, and performance is another discussion.
Hey, Bob, you have a question you wanted to ask?
Not just a question, just in response to John. I think a very high level order of magnitude of how that salary will be adjusted for inflation over the past 2 years is, you know, from everything I've been reading, we could take like a 5% number for the past year and like a 2.753% for the year before. So roughly, I would think there should be 8% higher than the 111, which would be another 99, another 8,800. Just as a rough, Angela, is that what you've been reading about inflation?
Yes,
factors?
yeah, I just hate to quote, I'm glad you did, but that sounds about
Yeah.
right.
That's rough. That's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
what I mean, I keep
Yeah.
reading this stuff over and over about
Yeah.
inflation going up and some of it's
Yeah.
sticking. So
So
anyway.
Bob, should Renee and I just look at the 8,800 and say, okay, it's rough, but that's what we're going to go with? Or should we ask you and Angela to come up with perhaps a more precise number for us? What do you think?
Not me. You wouldn't ask me. That's something to ask Angela if you want it.
What
I'm just
Chairman,
giving
is
you
this
my
the
rough rule of thumb.
time? Forgive me, but
Go
is
ahead,
this
Renee.
time? I thought we were supposed to write evaluation reports. I would very much champion, you know, a cost of living rise, you know, but I don't think this is the time, place. And I just got off my 2 cents. And by the way, Bob, would you tell Angela who your biggest client is and how the length of time, seeing that she was, you know, doing HR for Lee County School Board? I think she'd be very interested to hear who your client
My
is.
biggest client is the teachers' retirement system of the city of New York.
Ah,
It's the
very good.
largest one in the country, Angela.
Yeah,
They're doing it
It's
for 20 years.
not the largest, the 25th largest, and they've been a client since 2001.
nice. Yeah,
No,
I was
just
also the chief negotiator. So I was responsible for negotiating, 80% of the school district budget every year. So I understand.
I thought Andrew, you'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But if you're asking for the overall recommendation, I mean, I always advocate for the median or higher. I just think that, especially with, the craziness going on in the world and, how it's tough. The workforce is tough right now. So I always advocate that you at least want to be at the median to be competitive. Higher if you can, or maybe that factors into something tied to performance. But, just based on what I've seen and what I know, that would be my recommendation to you overall. But I provide all the numbers so that you can kind of see as you make your final decision.
Right.
So your median for the executive director is 121,000. The median you're talking about for the director of operations is 96,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And Chairman, just a point of reference, at our last meeting, we said that we would write out, the other chairman would write a performance report, submit it to you. It would be discussed publicly at the meeting. And then you would offer a suggestion of what the salary should be. And that's what we decided last meeting. So,
So where are we on that?
You have to give us
today?
a deadline when you want us to write our performances, Commissioner
okay.
Pyle and myself, and then we can add that to the agenda items. I'm sure
Great.
Jennifer would like to.
Well,
move.
also in our past meeting, I believe in October, I was told, given direction by you all, that I can handle my own staff, the staff that reports to me. So I've already written Daniel Munt's performance evaluation and delivered it to him. He already has it.
Right, but I think the
And then-
commissioner's performance evaluation is, oh, I see, with Daniel, yeah, okay, but I'm sure.
Yeah, and so for me, so if you recall, Renee, I believe I sent you a blank performance evaluation back in September, October. I'll
Yeah,
have to
you
check
did.
my emails.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it was sort of a fill-in sheet. I'm just going to write a letter as far as saying, these are the things that I think, are great. These are the things I think that need to be approved upon. This is my evaluation of you. It's not going to be checking off boxes that, did they do this? Did they do that? I mean, that's very nice
But
of you to do that, but I have no interest in writing someone else's scripted report. I'm going to write something that's heartfelt and honest and truthful and transparent and, whatever it is.
but, and I also believe in that same meeting where we talked about me doing Daniels, you all also said that every commissioner would do a performance
That's
evaluation
right,
on
yeah.
me because I report to all of you.
That's right. And that's why at this meeting, we said that we would write it and that if James is listening or someone can tell us, I believe in the minutes, it stated that we would write it, give it to the chairman, and then the chairman would ask for, would talk about it and make a motion at some meeting. So I'm asking for a timeline so that we can write it.
Mhm.
We can publicly, do what we have to do, protocol wise.
Okay, so Jennifer, looking at, first, please make sure that Dick Pyle is aware of this. And second, can you figure out a date that we can have this kind of discussion in terms of
Sure.
the reviews?
So, yeah, so just to clarify, you're directing me to develop the timeline. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? You want to find an appropriate date? You would need time. Everyone would need time, obviously, to do their performance evaluation on me. Then they would send that information to you as the chair. And then I can just tell you what I've experienced as a city council member with our city manager. And then it was the mayor who would sit down with the city manager, go over all the performance evaluation, and then we would have a public meeting where you would discuss your recommendations based on all the commissioners' feedback.
That's right.
Okay, so we
And I
could
think
probably.
Renee's pretty close. Renee's pretty close to having his done. So
I
the
haven't
question-
even started, but I would, Chairman, if you could just say, I want everyone's letter in a week. You'll have everyone's letter in a week. And we do have a lot of workshops planned. I mean, we have to do our strategy. And there's something looming about called we have to start the apportionment. We have to start, figuring out what we're going to pay people. Charge people. And that's the last part of that's a very big deal. And at the same time, we need a number from our existing economists because of the issues that we had, that we might be getting another number. So that is something that's very time critical. So there's a lot on the agenda. But it would be nice to wrap this up in a month. And then there's going to be 2 more board members. Do they chime in? I mean, so.
So the way that that's worked in my experience is so for example, we have a brand new council member in Cape Coral who he'd been on board about 4 months before we did performance evaluations of the city manager, and he did not weigh in. So that is up to you all. You will have to decide that as a board,
Right.
if you'd like them to weigh in. Of course, they do vote. So if you're saying, if you're giving me direction, Chairman, to have this perhaps on the March agenda, we do have our voting meeting on Monday. And during commissioner comments, Chairman, you could state that you want, performance evaluation by this date, and then direct your team to send you their letters or a form. I can share a form if they're more comfortable with that. And you set the date, Chairman.
So what is the date of the next election?
The date of,
It's
February 7th.
February. It's the first meeting in February, but Jennifer, I thought I was pretty candid saying, I don't want to fill out a form. I'm going to write a letter.
no, I didn't, I said, I have a form for commissioners who are more comfortable with the
They've been
form.
telling me that form isn't so great. It's like.
You can use whatever you want, Renee,
No, I
and you
know,
can
but
tell
sending-
them.
Yeah, okay, fine.
You can have them do, it's whatever you all decide as an elected board, how you want to handle it. I have a form if they would like to use it. If you don't, that's fine too. Just decide amongst yourselves. Get
Okay,
consensus.
so we're gonna get input from Renee and Dick Pyle by February 4th. And we will have on the 7th, before the election, the first item is going to be this salary discussion and this change in title for Dan. But we're going to have that before the election. I do not think it's fair to have 2 new commissioners come in, write comments about an institution and the operations of that institution where they have absolutely no prior experience. I'm not going to do that.
Okay, so just to clarify, Chairman Sylvia, what you're saying is you want this as an agenda item for the February 7th meeting to talk about salary adjustment and my performance evaluation, correct?
You got it.
Okay, got it.
Chairman Sylvia, may I be the devil's advocate just for a moment? And I don't have conviction on this one. I'm just playing, I'm being very Bill Clinton and looking at all the facets. There are 4 people, of which one especially has a former CEPD member, and another one who's been very interactive in some of, another board member, and then, the other 2. So it's just that of 2 of the 4 people are pretty, I won't say as seasoned as us, but they're not just coming into this having no clue as to what's really going on. I mean, as far as the background, the history, and I have no dog in this fight. I have no conviction on this one. I'm just saying that this is also something to ponder. But
From an
if
HR
there was to do-
yeah.
Go ahead, Angela.
From an HR sort of legal slant, I would advise against having them.
Okay.
I understand they may be knowledgeable, but she has not been reporting to them, and their way in one way or another could put the board in a precarious position.
Well, after Angela's comments, you have my blessing, Chairman, to do that with no further pointing of other alternatives.
Got it. Nice. Very nice. Clarification then, what are we going to do about Dan and his title change and the salary? Are we going to have an agenda item where we review what Jennifer had to say and we will just agree with it or not agree with it? Is that what we're doing with Dan?
I would recommend that I can send all of the 3 of you Dan's performance evaluation. You all can review it. And then as this is an agenda item for the February 7th meeting, you all could take the vote to do the salary adjustment per Dr. Pruitt's recommendation of the median and do that. Or take the vote to not do anything, or take the vote to.
No, we're gonna
Yeah,
vote
so-
on the 7th
okay.
for Dan.
Okay.
And we're gonna, and do we need to vote for the change in title?
Yes.
Okay, let's put it on the agenda.
Then
Let's
you would
get-
also, what
get it
I'd like
done.
to do is have a contract prepared for Dan with all of this so that you have time to review it before the February 7th meeting so that you can go ahead and approve the contract at the same time.
Then let's do it.
Okay. Okay,
And then, James, when you get a chance, would you send me a draft agenda for February 7th to make sure we're clear on all this?
Yep, I'm gonna make the changes as soon as we're done in here, and I'll send both you and Jennifer an updated agenda.
yes, and then Chairman Sylvia, if you'd like to meet on Friday to talk about it, we could, tomorrow, if you'd like to meet via phone or on the island, we'll all be in the office tomorrow, so I'm happy to meet with you. If you want to come over and go through it with me, we can do that.
Tomorrow's a tough day, but perhaps someday next week?
Sure, sounds good. Well, we leave for St. Augustine Tuesday, so it would have to be Monday.
Monday the 31st,
Yes,
meet in your office in the afternoon.
that'd be fine. Tell me what
Good deal.
time.
2 o'clock.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Angela, for
You're
your
welcome.
help. Thank you, Bob Gray, for your help and suggestion. And does anyone have any questions for Angela before we chairman adjourns?
Yeah,
Nope.
don't we have a commissioners thing? I wanted to add, because the only time due to, and thank you, Jennifer, for bringing out the sunshine laws. I wanted to, not for Angie, great to see you.
Thank
I actually
you.
look forward to giving you a call if I may, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Great.
All
I look-
right, take care.
Thanks, Angela.
Bye-bye.
Bye, have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I was incorrect when I said with sunshine, you know, Congress, they talk at night and this and that. I found out through Ralph Brooks that sunshine law is designated for municipality, it's Florida municipalities, districts, commissioners. So because of that, I assumed that we could talk about the philosophy and things like that that weren't actionable items that deserved a vote. And I was partially correct, but also, so thus, if I can't like call John up and say, John, how did your meetings go with this one and that one? Because I know some of these people very well, and I can, you know, share with you what their comments were, how realistic it was, or to put it directly, whether you're being spun or not. So with that being said, this is the only opportunity in a workshop that we can have a discussion as
Correct.
to the working. So
Correct.
John, if you don't mind, I'd love, can you tell me who you've spoken with? We know you spoke with Chauncey. Who else have the two of you
Bye,
connected?
Bob.
Bye-bye. Bob.
Bye, Bob.
Bye, Bob. Always great to see you.
Renee, you are speaking to the choir. I have expressed my frustration with this whole thing because to me, it's amazing that we are not able to have a discussion about what it is and what we're doing. And it all has to be in these minutes. And I understand what the sunshine law is trying to get at. But quite frankly, Renee, it's hard for me to think about a situation where, you know, we can't discuss what our points of view are outside of these meetings, but it is what it is. And I just find it very, very difficult. So with respect to your question, I did meet with Jay Brown and I've met with James Evans to try to get their points of view and try to let them know that we want them to be part of the process as we move forward with sea level rise. My experience in Washington, when I was trying to round up the legislative directors from different senators, is to tell them what we're thinking of doing, getting their input before anything is put on paper. And that's what I'm trying to do, plain and
Okay, who
simple.
else did you talk to, though? I'm just curious who you spoke to Jay, you spoke to James Evans, because you had quite a list. I was
Oh,
very.
yeah, I
impressed
have
with
quite a
that.
list. Did talk to Chauncey with, I think it's Chip. I think
Yeah,
it's Chip Roach. I
Right.
spoke to him.
Right.
I'm going to speak to some other people trying to set up meetings. I spoke to a lady at CCA.
oh, the Civic Association.
Yeah,
Okay.
I spoke to her,
Mhm.
and that's as far as I've gotten.
Okay. All right, well, at the next, I'm just curious, what did Chauncey have to say? Chauncey is, because we're in public, so I have to watch my words. Chauncey is a very nice man. His father, as you know, was a congressman, and he was part of the incorporation effort in Sanibel in the 70s. And he was also a formidable congressman, from what I've been told. Chauncey's run for government. He ran for Congress. He lost to Rooney. Chauncey is always very energetic for his needs. And that can be utilized when he, in that case, I've always found that when people are energized because maybe they're running a campaign or they want to get reelected for something, it's always a good time to get the commitment word out of them. And, so I would stay on top of Chauncey as much as possible because of the fact that he is. And if, for example, you have some, which I'm sure you do, have a lot of powerful friends in DC, let them know that. Let them know, hey, and again, this is all just theoretical, but, I think with Chauncey, to get the most out of Chauncey is to show him some of your shiny political tools that you have access to. And perhaps that might act as a motivating factor for him to help us as much as he possibly can. So
Yeah,
I hope I
the impression I got from Chauncey, he has an incredibly huge water district. I was amazed that his district goes all the way up towards Orlando and
Mhm.
the eastern part of the state and us. And then I looked at a map. I went on the website. I mean, he by far has the biggest district.
Mhm.
But I was, again, maybe I'm confused. I was a little bit taken aback with, and I'm not sure who said it, whether it was Carrie or Christine. It seems as if this area has sort of gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't,
no, that's absolutely true. So the big question is, how active is Chauncey? Is he out there, rolling up his sleeves, taking names and kicking butt? I mean, I don't know. But these are questions that we should just find out, because then
Yeah.
we can see, because, Chauncey could be very, very helpful. I unfortunately cannot share with you how motivated he is.
fair enough.
So just an FYI, since you're the boss now, you're the front guy. So just the guy in the back whispering, I'm the consigliere.
There you go. But you have made some really good comments today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, great. All right, so letters by oh God, that's this weekend, the week. All right, done.
Next week. So if you want, what I can do is send an email out to all the three of you, attach a form if they want to use it, say that the chairman has requested that you all submit performance feedback for me by next Friday, right? Which will be the 4th. Does that work?
That works for me.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. And that way we have, and please, there's one thing that all of us share in common right now, all the staff and all the commissioners. None of us have been involved. Well, I was 20 years ago, but none of us have been involved in this apportionment where we send out the bills and this and that. And there's a lot of stuff. Like, for example, Jennifer, during a panel meeting, Ann Brady asked you about, well, when will the bills be going out? And naively, and it was corrected, you said, oh, January. And Chairman Mullins pointed out at the time, he says, no, you're kidding. It would be this summer if it's a miracle because of all the.
I
the
know,
things
I remember.
involved.
And
So-
yeah, and actually he said September, because one of the things that we needed to make sure of, that the property appraiser had all of the updated values for the properties. So, which I believe Dan's
Yeah,
map
but
is integrating.
Finished, the actual bill, not the estimation. And I always get the words mixed up. But the proposed versus the real. So it's just something with all the spinning plates we have, none of us are 100% aware of how to do it. So what I was going to recommend, Chairman, is if you would indulge us and just giving, former, Mike Mullins, give him a call and just, tell him what's afoot, because none of us have done it. So instead of just going in there in the blind, let's, going forward, it's Mike's favorite words, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So it is, it's the final, very important step where we send out the bill. And it's not just the mechanization of how to do it or where we get the values and all that. We also have this wild card if Dr. Strong can get those numbers faster and where he's at with it, so that we can maybe submit it to the county and see if they would be kind enough to change the interlocal agreement to add in the new numbers, which would benefit the taxpayers here, according to Daniel's calculations, to the tune of $1 million. And so in order to do this, I mean, like right now, the ball has been put in Dr. Strong's court. And knowing Dr. Strong and knowing that Jennifer persistently has had trouble reaching him, that we need to reach out to him, in my opinion, and say, hey, where are we at? You got the numbers yet? I think it's going to take a push, and unless something has changed. Dan, do you have any?
As I told you last week, Renee, Dr. Strong did reach out to me and asked me to get the total vacancy, the
Right.
total number of rooms available during those years. And I've reached out to both Tweedwaters and South Seas and have not heard back from either. So
Okay,
that's on my
so-
list to follow up tomorrow with Bob Walter and Tony Lappy's
Okay, so
GM.
Can I be rude? Why, you have a staff of 5 people. If I'm in the middle of a stock trade, I don't wait a week to get an answer. I call back 2 hours later. I have someone call and say, hey, what do you need? Do you need some help getting those numbers? We're kind of on a timeline here, but to wait a week and then they'll get back to us another week, then it's 3 weeks. I'm sorry to be so, I just think that we have to, you have a big staff. And these people are very capable of picking up the phone during their day-to-day and making the call and saying, just so you know, we needed the numbers yesterday. When will we get the numbers? This and that. I mean, just say I think it was 2 weeks ago, but that's fine.
Right. But here's the
I'm
deal.
just
So I
saying,
have given that task to Dan before,
Right.
and they don't respond to him. They seem to respond to me. So I'm happy to
Okay.
give them a call after this meeting. I don't know the gentleman at Tweedwaters, but I'll text Tony and get his number, but I can
Right.
call Bob Walter right away.
Well, Chairman, do you understand where I'm coming from? We've had, and this isn't just with Jennifer, it's, you know how it is. If people, they don't find it important, it's up to us to just push. And we do have a timestamp on this. So,
So
and
let's
then
push.
there was a time for like 3 weeks where at the beginning where Strong wouldn't even get back to anyone. And I said, that's ridiculous. Well, look at the emails I sent. Look at the phone numbers I sent. Well, what's that phone number? This was when Michael or John was there. And luckily I had a phone number on him. He picked up like in one call, and it was his mobile number. And then once we got in, the whole process started. So we cannot accept to be in a situation where our future is at the mercy of others. Our timelines, we don't want our timelines controlled by others. And to me, we just got to politely, however it's done, these are called, what's the word? Stakeholders. And the relationship with the director to the stakeholders is also getting information when needed. So this is not a criticism, but I'm just saying, Chairman, there's always reasons why things don't come in. But as you know, being in the finance business, when you need the numbers, you need the numbers. You need them fast because it affects everything. So I just want to put, now that you're chairman, you get to push.
You got
I
it.
will point out when it's not being done. But now I'm telling you, this is a great situation. And kudos to Dan for finding out the math, and kudos to everyone for continuing in this direction. And previously there was a push to just ask the TDC what kind of numbers came in generally, and that didn't move the needle at all. That was the wrong direction. But the right direction was just, well, we all know the history. But I'm just saying, let's just get some results. Let's get the answers. Let's not say, well, they didn't get back to me. Let's just, I'd rather someone call me and say, like, like if you both called and said, we can't get anyone the answer, then I'll start swearing at Bob Walter on the text and saying, hey, what's your problem? Call me. You know, when you send a nasty text, they always call you back. I'm not afraid.
So Jennifer, I would suggest to you that you call them even later this afternoon and ask them to get back to us by Monday. And if they don't get back to us by Monday noon, I will call them Monday afternoon, and let's go with that. Let's just up the
No problem.
quit messing around. Oh, Renee, let me ask you a quick question about Mike. In terms of calling him, is it, how's he doing with his wife and his?
Doing
do you think
great.
it's okay to call?
He's doing great. She's doing great. Every
Okay.
time you talk to him, it's more beneficial. Now, I actually asked him if he would consider doing a workshop. He said no, but he said that if John will call me, I'll take his call. And
Good.
because I said, Mike, none of us have done this before. You've done it twice, and you're a smart guy, and you know all the little not tricks, but all the potential roadblocks that tend to creep up. It would, I think it would be fabulous. And as I said, I think it would benefit, as you said, his institutional knowledge is amazing. And
All right, buddy.
Consider
Consider it done.
Get the knowledge.
Consider it done.
Yeah. So give him a call anytime or an email. He will respond. And if he doesn't respond in 48 hours, let me know.
Yeah, you're the concierge.
Yeah, and enforcer sometimes. But anyway.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Are we all set then, folks?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you, Jennifer, for bringing Angela. I thought she did a great job.
No problem.
All right, folks, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.